I thought the worst part was catching my wife with my best friend, until I realized they were planning it all, and using my money to do it. But what they didn't know was that I was already 2 steps ahead. From the second-floor bedroom window I stood there, just watching. Frozen. Below me, at the front of our house, my wife Christy was wrapped up in the arms of Jake Williams. Yeah, that Jake. The same guy I once introduced as my best friend. My so-called brother in life. They had just come back from another outing, 5th one in a row if I was counting right. I wasn't supposed to know, but I did. They'd spent the day downtown like they were just another couple in love. And now they stood at my front door like it was their place. Laughing. Whispering. Pressed against each other in that kind of way you don't fake. I couldn't pull myself away. And as painful as it was, I listened. I want to spend the whole week with you, Jake said, his voice low and serious. Christy looked up at him, her smile fading just a little. Not a whole week, Jake. Not yet, she sighed. Maybe just the weekend. Jake cocked his head, curious. All right, but what's the catch? She didn't miss a beat. You have to get Mike to pay for it. Jake blinked like he didn't hear her right. Then he chuckled. Christy, come on. You know I've got money. More than he ever will. I can pay for the whole weekend 5 times over. But she cut him off, her voice sharp. No, you don't get it. That's not the point. Jake raised an eyebrow. Then what is the point? She leaned in, eyes gleaming. His humiliation, she said. It was like someone reached inside my chest and squeezed. She kept going, almost breathless now. Tell me it doesn't excite you, the way he looks when he knows you've taken what's his. How small he feels. How pathetic. Jake shifted uncomfortably, pulling back a bit. Christy, he's my friend, he said weakly. You know that, right? I don't know if I like this. But her lips curled into a grin. Oh, please. You love it? Watching him try to act like nothing's wrong while we're out there playing with him. You're just like me, Jake. I saw it, the way her body shifted like she couldn't hold back anymore. Her energy was pulsing. Desperate. Jake leaned in again, his voice almost a whisper. Let's stop this charade. Let's just run off together. Leave him behind. He's a joke, Christy. You and I, we could be something real. She laughed, a soft, teasing sound. Tempting, she murmured, running a finger down his arm. But here's the deal, cowboy. If I can get him to foot the bill for our wild little getaway, then I might take you up on that offer. Jake exhaled, somewhere between frustrated and amused. But there was that familiar glint in his eye, the one that said he was in, no matter how twisted it got. Something tells me this weekend is gonna be interesting, he whispered into her ear, pulling her close one last time before slipping away. And there I stood, so silent. The man in the window, staring down at the ruins of everything I thought was mine. I stood behind the curtain of our second-floor bedroom, looking down at the front steps like a man watching a slow-motion train wreck. There she was, Christy, my wife of 7 years, wrapped up in the arms of Jake Williams. Jake, the guy I once called my brother. My closest friend. They'd just come back from another one of their little outings downtown. 5th one in the past few weeks. 5th time I watched them act like something out of a romance movie, only this one was playing out on my front porch. I should have looked away. Should have walked away. But I couldn't. I just stood there, numb, trying to piece together what the hell had happened to my life. And then I heard them. Not everything. Just enough. I want more than a few hours with you, Jake said, his voice low. I want the whole week. Just you and me. Christy paused, leaning back slightly, her smile fading. Not the whole week, she murmured, almost like she regretted having to say it. Not yet, Jake. Maybe just the weekend. Jake tilted his head, intrigued. What's the catch? She looked up at him with this gleam in her eye, the kind I used to think was reserved for me. You've got to get Mike to pay for it, she said like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jake laughed, shaking his head. That's ridiculous. You know I've got money. I could buy out the whole hotel if I wanted. But Christy's tone shifted. Her voice was sharper now. No, you're missing the point. It's not about the money. Jake raised an eyebrow. Then what is it about? She leaned closer, her words slicing like glass. It's about his humiliation. That's what I want. I felt my heart hit the floor. Come on, she continued, her voice sultry and mean. You know you get a thrill out of it too. Watching him act so clueless while we twist the knife a little deeper every time. Jake stepped back, looking uncomfortable. He's still my friend, Christy. I'm not okay with that. But then he gave her that look, the one that always meant he'd cave. And she knew it. You're just like me, she whispered. Admit it. You like the game. You like watching him try to hold it all together while we take everything from him. I could see her fidgeting, shifting in place like she couldn't contain herself. Her energy was electric, desperate and unashamed. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. Jake's voice cracked a little as he leaned in again. Let's stop pretending. Let's run away from this mess. Let's leave him behind, Christy. I want you. Just you. She laughed softly, and I'll never forget the sound. It was playful and cruel all at once. Maybe, she teased, if I can get him to cover our weekend getaway, meals, hotel, all of it, then I might consider running off with you. Jake let out a breath, half annoyed, half aroused. But then he smirked, like he knew he'd go along with it anyway. I've got a feeling this weekend's going to be interesting, he said, pulling her in for one last tight hug before slipping away down the sidewalk. And I just stood there at the window, trapped in my own home, watching the people I trusted most plan the next chapter of my betrayal. I could hear her through the wall, voice low and shaky. I'm worried, Christy confessed, trying to gather herself. I imagined her clutching the phone with both hands, trying to stop her nerves from getting the better of her. He didn't even kiss me when he came home, she whispered. Not a hug. Not a word. Just walked right past me like I wasn't even there. Jake's voice came through, calm and smooth. Don't stress so much, sweetheart. He's probably just starting to realize what's happening, that you're slipping away. And there's nothing he can do about it. There was a pause. Then he added, I'll come over tonight. We'll take care of everything together. Let me talk to him. I'll fix this. Christy hesitated. All right. I hope you're right. I really do. Her voice cracked just a little. See you tonight, my love. Back downstairs, I placed the bottle of scotch carefully back on the shelf, the glass still untouched. I turned slowly, staring at Jake like I was looking through him. Friend, I said almost to myself. Are you really my friend, Jake? He looked away, caught off guard. Mike, come on. I cut him off. Christy was right. You're used to being around guys who roll over. Pushovers. You don't know what to do when someone pushes back. Jake stood up, shifting uncomfortably. Mike, I've been your closest friend for years. Don't do this. A crooked smile crept onto my face. Best friend? I echoed, letting the words linger. Then I'm sure you won't mind what I'm about to ask. Jake raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I sat down calmly, opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. I want 25% of your capital, I said flatly. No emotion. Just the facts. Jake blinked, stunned. That's over $50 million, Mike. Are you insane? 53 million and change, I corrected him. I double-checked the figures this morning. And no, I'm not kidding. Not even a little. Jake shot up from his seat, eyes wide with disbelief. This is blackmail. This is humiliation, Mike. You've completely lost it. I shrugged. Call it whatever makes you feel better. The offer's good until noon tomorrow. After that, the price goes up. I'll want 50% and controlling interest in your company. His jaw clenched. You're trying to ruin me. No, I replied calmly. I'm giving you a choice. He stormed out, fuming, hands waving in frustration. And I just sat there watching him go, wondering how long this storm had been building beneath the surface. Later, I could hear Christy giggling in the other room. Not just yet, she teased, probably brushing Jake's hand away. But soon. I didn't react. I didn't move. I had already stepped out of their game. Now they were stepping into mine. I can't wait for the day Mike brings us drinks in a restaurant, like some lowly waiter, Christy giggled as Jake leaned in and gave her one last kiss before heading out. She lingered in the doorway for a few moments, watching him disappear into the night. Then, without a word, she turned and stepped back inside the house. As she walked through the foyer, she noticed a sliver of light coming from under the door of Mike's home office. A flicker of unease crept into her chest. Had he been there all along? She reached for the handle only to find the door locked. She hesitated. Mike? She called out softly. No answer. Shrugging it off, she headed toward the kitchen, her heels clicking lightly against the hardwood floor. That's when a wave of savory aroma hit her. It stopped her in her tracks. The scent was rich, warm, completely unexpected. She stepped into the kitchen to find Mike at the stove, plating food with a level of precision she hadn't seen in years. He was calm, collected, almost radiant in the low light. I didn't know you could cook, she said, genuinely surprised. Mike glanced at her over his shoulder, then calmly wiped his hands on a dish towel. There's a lot you don't know about me, he said, setting the towel down. Maybe if you spent less time with Jake, you'd have figured some of it out. There was no bite in his voice. Just a quiet, steady force. He turned back to the counter, grabbing 2 flutes of champagne and placing them gently on the table. Then he disappeared for a moment and returned with a large silver platter, carefully balanced in his hands. Jake, now seated comfortably at the table, flashed Christy a wide grin, like a cat who had already eaten the bird. "My dear, you look stunning tonight," he said, gently lifting her hand and kissing it. "I see you've taken off your rings. That's a pretty bold move." Christy blushed a little, her smile hesitant. Mike served the dish, saying nothing, watching their charade like an actor in someone else's play. But something had shifted. He wasn't broken. He was composed, focused. His silence now carried weight. As the meal unfolded, Christy reached for her glass, only for it to slip through her fingers and crash to the ground. Glass shards scattered around her chair. She stared at them, stunned. A few minutes passed in uneasy silence. Jake yawned and rubbed his eyes, swaying slightly in his seat. Christy blinked slowly, her posture sagging. Mike stood still, almost solemn. Then he spoke as if reciting something long rehearsed. "You know, Jake," he began, "she's been doing this for years. The cheating. The coldness. The little digs to make me feel less than human. And yeah, I let it happen. That's on me." Christy's eyes were glassy now, her head drooping forward. Jake mumbled something unintelligible, barely lifting his head. Mike looked down at them, slumped in their chairs, limp and dazed. The satisfaction was immediate but hollow. He disappeared into the garage and returned moments later with a wheeled cart. He moved with care, almost reverence, as he loaded their bodies onto it. Out in the night air, under the stars, he paused for a breath. Christy gasped suddenly, her eyes fluttering open, wide with horror. "Mike, what are you doing?" she whispered. Jake stirred beside her, groaning. "What's he saying?" he muttered. Mike knelt between them and met their panicked gazes. "You don't get to rewrite what you did. You both treated me like I didn't matter. But I'm not my brother. I'm not a fool." He stood up, voice low and composed. "You called it weakness. I call it clarity. Intuition, maybe. That feeling you get when something deep down won't let you ignore the truth anymore." And with that, Mike turned toward the house, leaving the night to do what it would with the weight of his decision. "I wish I could have been wrong about you, for Mike's sake." Michael exhaled, lacing his fingers together, his eyes drifting toward the horizon. "But unfortunately, I wasn't." Christy blinked, confused. "Mike never said anything about having a brother." Michael gave a tight smile. "That's because I told him not to. I begged him, actually." Then he chuckled darkly. "You know, technically, I don't even exist. Not in any legal or clean-cut sense. I could explain, but let's focus on the real question. What kind of friend betrays his so-called brother by stealing his wife?" He paused, staring hard at Jake, whose silence was deafening. "And you?" Michael turned to Christy, his tone sharp. "No clever words now? No seductive lies? Just silence? That shame starting to sink in?" Neither of them responded. He continued. "You were never his friend, Jake. You fed off his kindness, used his loyalty like a stepping stone to inflate your own ego. You humiliated him every chance you got, and he still forgave you." Michael stepped forward, voice steady, almost cold. "But you made a promise to me too. Remember? You said there was no way out. That once it started, there was no undoing it." Christy finally spoke, her voice shaking. "You're insane. You'll never get away with this." "Maybe," Michael said with a shrug. "Or maybe not. But when they find your little farewell note on the computer upstairs, the details won't matter much." He turned back to the table, pouring himself a final glass of wine. "I have to admit, it is a beautiful letter. Almost poetic. But now, let's change the setting, shall we?" He walked toward the garage, talking as if giving a lecture. "They say no one's ever reached the bottom of Echo Lake. Some locals even call it bottomless. Deep, dark, and silent. Sounds like the perfect place to bury a few mistakes." He grunted as he wheeled the cart toward the back of the truck, the clinking of chains echoing through the cool air. The chains were heavy, wrapped tight around them both. He didn't speak anymore. Before leaving, Michael reminded himself to burn what remained: the clothes, the documents, the last fragments of the person they used to know. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, and sent a brief text. "It's done. All cleaned up." A few minutes later, a reply buzzed back. "Thanks, buddy. Safe journey. You deserve peace." But here's the thing, they never saw it coming. They believed I was gone. Dead. And to them I am. But the truth? I'm alive. I boarded a flight that same night. One-way ticket. New name. New country. New life. A small island off the coast, quiet and peaceful, where the only noise is the crashing waves and the laughter of strangers who don't know my past. I spend my mornings helping out with fishing boats and my evenings with Sally. She's kind, divorced, about my age. We go shopping together, catch old movies at the town cinema. No drama. No betrayal. Just quiet, gentle company. And every so often, when the wind hits just right, I remember the man I used to be, the one they tried to destroy. And I smile because they didn't succeed. I left the pain behind. But I never let go of the lesson. Lately, I found myself preferring the quiet of home. Solitude had become a kind of companion. With Christy spending more and more time out, especially now that she was involved in the local library board, I had space. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. It was Sally, a neighbor and friend of ours, who encouraged Christy to start attending those library board meetings. At first, they were harmless, just a couple of hours a month. But then something shifted. The meetings started running longer. Her explanations got vaguer. And that's when I noticed something odd. Christy and I had recently started talking about having a family. After 5 years of marriage, we felt, at least I thought we felt, it was finally the right time. We had put it off while building careers and saving money. Now the pieces seemed in place. But something didn't sit right. She would show signs of wanting closeness, especially during certain times of the month, but always pulled away after the meetings. Said she was tired. Headaches. Stress. Every time. Like clockwork. The pattern stirred something in me, an old instinct that had been quiet too long. If those meetings were the only time our schedules didn't align, it meant something else might be aligning for her. I started asking myself the questions I didn't want answers to. Who was he? How long had it been going on? Where did they meet? Was he on the board too? That night, as Christy lay sleeping beside me, I slipped out of bed. Quiet. Intentional. I went downstairs and nearly tripped over her purse. It was unzipped. Now, Christy had always been guarded about her things. Especially her phone. Her purse was off limits. But something told me not to ignore this moment. Inside, I found what I was looking for, and more. There were printed emails. Messages I hadn't seen before. Conversations that weren't meant for my eyes. They weren't just about logistics or schedules. They were about me. They spoke in low tones, condescending, even cruel. Jokes at my expense. Stories I hadn't known were being shared. But what hit hardest was the confession. Not about the betrayal, but about the thrill of it. The thrill of keeping secrets. Of hiding behind smiles and pretending everything at home was normal. I couldn't breathe. I started copying everything. Every letter, every exchange saved into my personal archive. I'd print them later. I needed evidence. Not for revenge. For truth. I went upstairs, bypassed our shared bedroom, and stepped into one of the guest rooms. It's where I kept my clothes, letting Christy have full reign over the walk-in closet. Funny how something so simple now felt like a metaphor for the rest of our marriage. Without waking her, I grabbed a bag, stuffed in a few essentials, and left the house. I turned off my phone before I hit the highway. 2 hours later, I pulled into my father's driveway. He lives alone now, an old widower with a small house tucked beside a quiet lake. Remote. Peaceful. The kind of place where the outside world feels far away. That morning, I sipped my coffee while he made breakfast. He didn't ask questions and I didn't offer explanations. Not yet. There would be time for that. For now, I just needed to breathe. To think. To exist without someone else's lies fogging the air around me. When I sat down with my father that morning over coffee, I shared the news I hadn't wanted to say aloud. The truth I'd uncovered about Mona. That she'd been unfaithful. That she'd been living a second life behind my back. He didn't say much. Just nodded slowly and stared out the window. But I saw it in his face. That quiet, pained look only a father gives when his son is hurting and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Before I left that morning, I called Mona. I don't even know why. Habit, maybe. She picked up with a trembling voice. I love you, she whispered before I could hang up. I didn't answer. I just let the silence linger before the line went dead. Later that afternoon, I drove into the city to meet with Ed Wiley, an old friend and attorney. When I walked into his office, Ed greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile. Good to see you, Jim. What's going on? I didn't waste time. I told him everything, about Mona, the affair, my suspicions, and how long I thought it had been going on. He didn't interrupt. Just listened like a man who had heard this story more times than he cared to count. I need to know my options, I said. He nodded. Let's take this one step at a time. After the meeting, I stopped by an electronics store and bought a high-end voice-activated recorder. It felt strange, preparing for something so covert, but I knew I needed the truth on my side. That night, I drove to the Red Roof Inn, Mona's rendezvous spot. I checked into a room just down the hall from theirs. I waited, recorder armed, nerves shot. They always arrived separately, I'd learned. Stayed for an hour. Left in different cars. Textbook routine, Ed had said, common among those trying not to get caught. In the quiet hours, with time to spare, I drove back home while she was still away. Something pulled me there. A need to search. To know. I sat down at our shared desktop computer and opened her email. It was all there. One thread in particular caught my eye, a recent exchange between her and someone I didn't recognize. The message was cryptic, but I read between the lines. She was worried about something. Maybe a pregnancy. It hit like a sledgehammer. Every minute I dug deeper, my hands shook more. By now, the idea of divorce wasn't just on the table, it was the only way forward. But that didn't mean I wasn't dreading the confrontation. Ending a marriage isn't just a signature on a page. It's grief. It's detachment from everything you thought was solid. Around 8 p.m. I called Mona again. Her voice was strained, raw, like she'd been crying. "You're not feeling well, are you?" I asked. There was a pause before she answered, her voice full of longing. "Oh, Jim, I just want you to come home." I hesitated, heart thudding. "I'll finish up here and head back soon," I lied. "Just hang in there." But I wasn't heading home, not like that. The next morning I returned to my dad's place. For the rest of the week I focused on simple things, fishing, fixing small things around the house, letting the quiet mend what it could. But Thursday came and I was ready. I went back to Ed's office. Sat down. Looked him in the eye. "Let's file," I said. He nodded, calm and professional. "I'll draw up the papers today. You'll have them in hand by Monday." And that was that. As I walked back to my truck I felt the weight shift. Not gone, but lifted just enough for me to breathe again. Mona and I used to talk about growing old together. About kids. About a home filled with laughter. But love without respect is just a house of cards waiting to fall. And I was done living in a lie. "I'll be home soon," I told her, trying to sound reassuring, even though something inside me was already shutting down. That evening we had dinner together at our favorite little bistro. Everything looked the same cozy corner booth, same menu we knew by heart. But the silence between us felt heavier than ever. There was no laughter, no real conversation. Just a slow, quiet chewing of shared memories. When we got home, Christy went straight upstairs. I followed behind, dragging my feet on every step like I was climbing toward something I no longer wanted to face. By the time I reached our bedroom, she was already lying on the bed, her clothes in a neat pile on the chair, her eyes watching me silently. Looking at her, it hit me. I was going to miss her. Not the woman she had become, but the version of her I used to know, the one who made me feel like I belonged to something real. But I couldn't share her. Not anymore. Not after everything. She was mine once. Only mine. But those days were gone. I had a feeling she wanted to talk about the pregnancy. And sure enough, when I sat beside her, she spoke in a whisper. "Yes," she said softly. I don't know why. The first time it happened, I told myself I'd never do it again. She paused, eyes filled with something between shame and confusion. But after our meetings, we'd start getting drinks afterward. And a couple of glasses. Well, you know how that goes. Things happen. At first it felt wrong, but then, it just got easier. She looked away, ashamed. "Sally told me once how exciting it felt, betraying her ex-husband," she said. I guess. I got curious. I sat in silence, letting her confession settle in like a bitter fog. "You should have thought about the consequences," I said finally. "You crossed the line, and not just once. This wasn't an accident. You chose to keep going." I stood up, hands shaking but voice steady. "This isn't just about the affair. You deliberately tried to get pregnant by him. You wanted me to believe that baby was mine. That's not a mistake, that's manipulation. That's cruelty." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but I didn't stop. "You didn't just break our marriage, you disrespected everything it stood for. And even if you'd stopped after the first time, maybe I could have found it in me to forgive you. But you didn't stop. You made a habit of it." I opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out the printed files. 13 confirmed visits to the Red Roof Inn. Paid with your old credit card. Same time, same pattern. You even left a trail in the motel system. I dropped the documents beside her on the bed. "And Derek's wife?" I continued. "She deserves to know too. About the affair. About the pregnancy scare. About the alimony she might suddenly be liable for if you try to pass off his child as mine." Christy buried her face in her hands. I turned toward the door, pausing only for a moment. It's your choice how this ends, but understand something. This marriage? It's already over. The next morning I left before sunrise. I knocked lightly on my dad's kitchen door before letting myself in. He was already up, sipping coffee at the table, reading the paper like it was just another Thursday. It wasn't. For me, it was the first day of something new. Something honest. When I pulled up to the Matthews home that morning, I wasn't sure what I expected. But when I saw them all sitting down for breakfast through the window, I hesitated. I thought about turning around and walking away. Before I could, Mona's father spotted me. He stood up from the table and opened the front door. "Jim," he said, surprised but warm. "Come in, son." Inside, they gestured for me to sit at the table. Mona's mother poured me a cup of coffee without asking, something she always used to do when I came around. "What brings you here so early?" she asked with concern. "Want to join us for breakfast?" I shook my head gently. I already grabbed something at IHOP. But, no, this isn't a social call. I came here because I felt it was only right to tell you something directly. Something hard. Mona's mother leaned in, concern sharpening her face. "Bad news?" I nodded. "Yes. About Mona." As I explained what I had discovered, the affair, the motel meetings, the messages, Mrs. Matthews looked stunned. "She's seeing someone else?" she asked quietly, her face growing pale. I nodded. "He's married. With kids, from what I've found." Before I could say anything more, she rushed to the phone. "I'm calling her right now. Her voice cracked. "I can't believe my daughter would do this. To you. To anyone." I stood slowly as she stepped into the next room, phone pressed to her ear. I could hear her voice rising as she questioned Mona, the pain obvious even through the wall. Mona's father hadn't moved. But as I turned to leave, he stepped toward me and gently gripped my shoulder. His face was wet with tears. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice trembling. "You didn't deserve this. You were good to her. You were good to us." I placed my hand on his briefly and nodded, feeling the weight of his sorrow settle in my chest. "Thank you, sir. I truly cared for her. I really did." He didn't need to say more. I think we both understood what had been lost. I explained that the divorce was already in progress, that I had documented everything, emails, timestamps, motel visits. The evidence was airtight. Mrs. Matthews returned from the other room, her face pale and stricken. "She denied it," she whispered. But I could tell she was lying. I just didn't want to believe it. "You can ask your husband," I said softly, gesturing behind her. "He's standing right there. He knows." The three of us stood together in the kitchen, a shared grief connecting us, though none of us had the words to carry it. The divorce was finalized not long after, just as I had proposed. There were no drawn-out battles. No dramatic court appearances. Just quiet signatures and the closing of a door I never thought I'd walk through. I remained single. But the betrayal by someone I once considered not just a wife, but a partner in every sense, left something behind, a fracture that didn't heal clean. Since then I've been trying to rebuild, piece by piece. I've started seeing a therapist. I've been reading, researching, diving deep into the psychology of trust, morality, and what it means to choose a partner who won't destroy your foundation. It's been slow, uncertain. But I haven't lost hope. Because even after everything, after the lies, the manipulation, the heartbreak, I still believe in love. I just believe it needs to come with honesty, with accountability, and with the strength to protect what matters. And next time, I won't ignore the signs.